Good morning. It is Friday, November 11th, 2016. It's Veterans Day, so if you are a veteran, let me personally thank you for your service. Nobody particularly likes warfare, but unfortunately, evils in the world have been perpetrated by people who don't respond to kind of anything else. So thank you for your service. I actually have my two boys, 20 and nearly 22. They're shipping out for the Navy in maybe the next month or so. We'll see if we can get them on board there. Anyway, we have been talking. So anyway, sincerely, thank you for your service. We have been talking about the properties of sound. We've kind of broken it down into these three different areas: volume, EQ, the EQ curve, and then the harmonic content. We talked about that a lot, about these odd and even harmonics and how they are multiples of the fundamental, and that pure waves like sine waves and things like that only have a fundamental, but anything complex above that, or when we start distorting that wave, then it starts throwing off all these harmonics, which are multiples of that fundamental. So I thought I'd do something fun this week and put it over to you and kind of point you in the direction of thinking of every way we mangle audio, right? Whether it be just from a fader going up and down to an EQ, to a high pass or a band pass filter, to a compressor, to a noise gate, to an octaver, to, I mean, all of these things. Let us try to think what parts of these, what three different kind of characteristics of sound we are manipulating when we're employing that particular tool. So let's do something really simple. We'll start off with just a fader. So a fader, you turn it up and down. What is that manipulating? Any of these three right here? Well, obviously it's underneath the volume category here. It's just adjusting the volume. But when you think of an entire mixer, a volume fader is actually changing the EQ, the spectral content of that mix as well. If this is your bass guitar fader, you turn it up, you're getting more bass in your mix. You turn it down, you're getting less bass in your mix, things like that. So along those lines, start to think about any particular part of your mixer or any plug-in or anything like that. You know, what is a pan pot? A pan pot is a volume fader between the left and the right speakers, and our brains are so adept at hearing where sounds come from between in the stereo spectrum that we perceive it coming from the left and the right. And along those lines, delay. You could use a delay to spread out things in a stereo mix. I'm kind of getting off the subject here, but I mean, think of every tool you have and think about how it affects everything here. Obviously, something like a band pass. Let's imagine a high pass filter to take the rumble off of a vocal. That is an EQ thing. That is taking the first couple of octaves and rolling it off at a very steep curve. Let's think about a compressor. What do you think a compressor is doing? Well, a compressor is actually, kind of an interesting one. At first blush, it's a volume modifier, right? Because it is adjusting the levels of a particular signal up and down and compressing its dynamic range. But there's another interesting thing about a compressor. On most compressors, you'll find an attack setting. And when you speed up that attack, in other words, it clamps down that waveform immediately, all the transients, which are typically in the higher frequencies, will get somewhat muted. So a fast attack makes a duller sound. So a compressor, which is really a kind of a volume modifier, actually screws around with the EQ as well. And then if you really start mangling the waveform, it will start throwing off some new harmonic content. So a compressor, like I said, at first blush is mainly in the volume column, it's actually affecting a lot of other things as well. So I'll make this a fairly short one this week. I just want to turn it over to you and drop in your comments and think about all the tools that we use that will change one of these three kind of characteristics of sound. And let's kind of have a discussion about some of the, some of the obvious ones, are pretty easy to go through. But let's start thinking about some of these, more complex ones. Actually, I think of another one is when you get into synthesis. Typically an analog synthesizer, just take any of the old Oberheims, Rolands, things like that. They tended to use a very complex waveform. Actually, not a complex waveform, but a waveform that threw off a lot of harmonic content, square waves, sawtooth waves, pulse width waves, and things like that. All of that throw off a lot of harmonic content here. And then we use filters to bring that down, and resonance of filters and AESRs and things like that. There's a lot of stuff in analog synthesis that uses the original waveform is just fat with a bunch of stuff. And people would think about that when you think of an analog synth, you go, man, it's a fat sounding synth. And even though everything is done digitally within your DAW, it's modeling what an analog synth used to do, starting off with a waveform that has lots of harmonic content. The reverse of that is additive synths. Casio had that with the CZ, but the big daddy of them all was the DX series from Yamaha. DX7 changed music, and it started the opposite way. It started off with very simple waveforms, sine waves, and then added those together to get more complex waveforms. Some people said it sounded a little bit thinner, but boy, there's a bunch of bass sounds from DX7 that just reverberated through music history. That was a big fat bass sound. So you kind of get the idea. Think of any tool we have, either in, like I just said, in synthesis or on your mixer or your plugins, and it's going to be mangling one of these three characteristics of sound. And one other thing I'm going to mention, I am uploading at the moment the masterclass in creating killer vocals. Wow, it's 4 hours of everything from how to warm up your vocals, what your vocals actually look like anatomically and how that all works, and how you cannot hydrate your vocals the way you think you can hydrate your vocals. We get into that, we get into arranging vocals, how to work out harmonies with chord shapes and inversions and intervals on a keyboard, how to make lush harmonies, make echo parts, make call and response parts, make vocal pads. All of this stuff is like 4 hours of all this stuff. Next week I'll probably shoot a promo, and we'll highlight that next week. So anyway, it's nearly here. It should be up maybe Monday or Tuesday, something like that. So keep an eye out for that. Anyway, make it a great weekend. Great to hear from you. Happy Veterans Day to all you folks who served, and we'll see you next week. Ciao for now.